happening. If I were to review today's movie after my first viewing, the thumbnail probably would have looked something like this. But after my first viewing, a few of my friends said they loved the movie, and one of them even suggested maybe my channel's growing slowly because I don't have a clue what I'm talking about. Now, normally, I would have cast their opinions aside and gone about my business, but this time, things are different. As some of you may know, I have had a very recent health scare, and without getting all squishy on you, it was scarier than anything I will ever feature on this channel. It was so scary, it got me re-examining pretty much everything, including the way I interpret movies. Now, the old me really wanted to make this channel successful, and the fact that we just ticked over 5,000 subscribers tells me things are going in the right direction. But the old me hadn't had a massive heart attack, had he? Now, the new me is even more determined to make the best videos I possibly can, so I did something very out of character. I watched all the big expert channels review together right here on YouTube.
So it really is all I could ask for this movie.
This is going to be the what the fuck did I just watch horror movie of 2025. I absolutely loved this thing.
But metaphorically, it's two people realizing that they can be stronger together.
Kept me on the edge of my seat, and I had a great time watching it. In fact, this is one of my favorite horror movies of the year.
Look, that movie is solid. There's no doubt about it. It was a great film.
Really loving the movie to the point that when I first saw it, I was like, it's best horror movie of the year.
And sometimes when a movie gets a lot of praise, it can be difficult to live up to the hype. That's not the case with Together. I found this movie absolutely incredible.
The old me thought Michael Shanks' new supernatural body horror was watchable, but a bit confusing and repetitive and nowhere near as clever as everybody kept telling me it was. But after spending 17 hours watching the experts review Together properly, I've realized if I adjust the way I interpret things, just slightly, Together is actually one of the best horrors of the year, and maybe ever. Today, I'm going to show you how clueless the old me was by pointing out everything I thought Together got wrong. And hopefully, by the end of the video, you'll have seen your first proper movie review on this channel, and I will have a sense of what it feels like to review a movie like the experts. The movie opens with a prologue in a forest where a search party is looking for a missing couple. Two sniffer dogs end up inside a cave where they drink from a mysterious Geiger-esque pool of water. The prologue ends with the dogs fused into a fleshy, two-headed, twitching monstrosity of a fairly decent practical effect. In other words, the dogs end up together. We meet Tim, a 35-year-old aspiring rock star, and his partner Millie, a sweet but stressed out schoolteacher. Millie thinks it's adorable they're accidentally wearing matching outfits, but Tim changes right away, and more on this later. They've invited 46 of their closest, best-looking pals round to their humongous apartment for a going-away party. And if you're thinking something massive must be dragging these two away from their marvelous city life, I'm gonna have to nip that sort of thinking in the bud. Millie's taken a job teaching 9th grade in the countryside, and being in her mid-30s, it's fair to say she'd be giving up 10 years worth of salary increases and benefits and tenure. And Tim doesn't look too excited about leaving his friends behind and all of the potential big city musical opportunities either. And as this story's set up, you might think this move feels like a baffling step backwards. The old me certainly did. But if all of the movie review experts here on YouTube loved this movie, obviously I must have missed something. And it turns out I had. Something Millie said during my first viewing slipped right past me. She just had a feeling the kids in the new town might be passionate about learning. And if her half-certain vague inkling of a notion hunch doesn't justify uprooting both of their lives, I don't think anything could have. I think I've learned something already, folks. Great movies, even some of the best, like Together, don't need logical character motivations or even believable ones. These character motivations are preposterous, but the experts on YouTube love the movie anyway. This is weirdly liberating, and I can't wait to learn more. Millie closes the party by proposing. At first, I thought director Michael Shanks' decision to have her do this confused their dynamic a lot. I mean, she should know him, right? But that's because I was thinking, Act 1 closes with Tim processing the ambush while Millie wonders out loud if it would be easier to break up now before it gets too hard to separate later. Did you see what Shanks did there, folks? He spelled everything out for us. Now, that would have driven the old me nuts. And it did. But I've learned something else. Spelling it out means less contemplating for me. And less contemplating for me means I can crank out twice as many light and fluffy YouTube videos. Just like the experts. Their new house is better looking than their 46 friends were, and big enough to give each of them their own room with a full-sized vanity mirror. Tim is also useless with power tools, and my small channel mind thought these traits made him an unlikable lead character, but the big channels taught me to focus on the expertly written continuity. He was also useless in the first act. Then he sniffs out a dying rat trapped behind the fascia and housing and decorative coving of a ceiling light 12 feet above the ground, which is remarkable acting given Dave Franco is 5'6". Then Millie meets Jamie, who was responsible for hiring her. He affirms my amateur-minded confusion about the move by immediately affirming her impressive resume. Then he tells her to explore the forest behind her house, which felt super abrupt. After seeing what happened to the poor dogs, this makes Jamie look very guilty. But in the industry, this is known as honest writing. Yes, it strongly suggests Jamie's the villain 15 minutes into the story, but it's also the truth, because he is the villain. So Tim depends on Millie to drive him everywhere too, and we also find out he sucks at guitar. He also uses tablature that shows him where his fingers go, like color-by-numbers painting. Musicians and third-grade music students go by the chords themselves. And as much as I was thinking this compounds Tim's unlikability, they have maintained continuity for 3 consecutive scenes, which is actually more important. The next day, they go hiking in a storm because that's fun, and they plummet into the cave. By plummet, I mean instead of lifting himself out of the hole with man muscles, he drags Millie in with him. The pair not only survive a 20-foot drop onto solid rock, they don't even sprain anything. Not even their hair. As unrealistic as this might appear on the surface, it really speaks to the brawn and inner resilience that I have just randomly attributed to both of them. Besides, movies are supposed to be an escape. If you want realistic, believable characters, go talk to your next-door neighbor for 2.5 hours. And then Tim drinks the stagnant cave water, and Michael Shanks' decision to show us how thirsty Tim was instead of telling us was just genius. The idea of show don't tell is fundamental to good writing, and Tim drinking the water does 2 things narratively speaking. It maintains continuity because it was moronic, and it shows us Tim was very, very thirsty because they'd only been in the cave for about 3 minutes. The water leads to Tim telling Millie something he's never told her before. As a child, Tim's father insisted his bedroom smelled foul, but Tim couldn't smell anything, so his father went in and discovered a dead rat in his ceiling light. Then Tim said he also found his father's decaying body in bed next to his mother, who sat next to him in shock for days. Now, you might be wondering how these 2 things are connected. You might also be wondering why he found the exact same thing in their new house. And you might also be wondering how Tim sniffed out the rat in the new house when he couldn't smell one in his own room, and he couldn't smell his decomposing father just down the hall in his childhood home. And when I mentioned Tim got changed when they realized their clothes were matching, and I said, more on that later, you might wonder why I don't actually have anything else to say about that. And I'm here to tell you, as a future big channel owner, it all comes down to something called suspension of disbelief, or your decision as an adult member of the audience to stop thinking and noticing things and shut up. They build a fire and bed down for the night because escape is impossible. Then Tim has a panic attack, and the cave has one too. This marks the point in the movie where Michael Shanks unleashes his real genius. Putting the couple inside the cave and synchronizing it with Tim after he drank the water was just genius. It elevates the cave from a setting to a metaphor. It would have been a metaphor just by putting them in the cave or even just mentioning a cave. But director Michael Shanks' decision to stuff metaphors inside of other metaphors, like a metaphor burrito, was also genius. I think the cave in this context can be seen as a womb or a tomb depending on the character's view of the subject matter being, of course, intimate relationships. For Millie, the cave is a womb as she is sleeping peacefully. And for Tim, the cave's a tomb because he's shaking like Fay Wray in King Kong's big sweaty fist. Michael Shanks uses the cave as a mirror for the couple's current state of mind, which is pretty frickin' clever, but there's even more. The water imagery comes directly from ancient alchemical transformation myths. Remember the fused dogs in the prologue? That is lifted directly from Plato's notion of the androgynous ideal. What the hell is that, you say? I'm glad you asked. Plato suggests that human beings used to look like this. We had 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 faces, and we were so remarkably powerful, Zeus had to weaken us by splitting us in half. This Plato myth serves as an allegory, and it represents our desire to find completeness in another person, hence the expression, my other half. And just as your head's starting to absorb 1/10 of the copious subtext, Millie blows my womb and tomb bullshit theory right out of the cave water when she wakes up panicking too. And if you feel like there's just too many things going on the way I did after my first viewing, remember what Michael Shanks clearly knows. With art, more is always better. The pair wake up with their legs stuck together, so they pull them apart and leave the cave. Yesterday, escape was impossible, but look at them go now. That is called character growth. From this point onward, Tim is overwhelmed by a physical pull towards Millie. He hurts her shoulder during a massage, implying a loss of control. Then his body follows Millie's when she's driving, suggesting he's directionless without her. Then starts the actual body horror, or the real, true genius of the film, when Tim wakes up choking on Millie's hair. The following day at the train station, Millie tells Tim to stay overnight with his music buddies, but he never even leaves, because he's feeling the overwhelming pull towards Millie I mentioned to you 5 seconds ago. He tracks her down at her new school, and the resulting scene is the one you've probably heard about. The couple engages in toilet nookie, and this results in them getting stuck together again, only this time, it's different parts. Director Michael Shanks' decision to show their genitals was just genius. If you think all this sticking together is starting to feel repetitive and kind of meaningless, it's not. I'll be the first to admit, after my first viewing, I remember thinking, what's happening here? Tim doesn't contribute financially or emotionally. He might have issues with commitment and intimacy, and those issues might relate to the death of his parents, but also, they might not have anything to do with the death of his parents, and he might not have any issues at all. After drinking the cave water, he's physically drawn to Millie, but we don't know if he's emotionally drawn to her too. We also don't know if any of this is coming from him, or if it's all just down to the water. And if we could figure all that out, we would still have the rat stink to contend with. So, you're an adult. Suspend the hell out of your disbelief. Immediately. If not sooner. When they get home, they fight in the driveway, and when Tim goes into miserable puppy mode, Millie heads to Jamie's house. She treats him like a psychologist, and he talks to her like one. And he explains what I just explained to you a minute ago. You know, that stuff. You complete me? If you weren't paying attention, that's cool. Just hit the like button. We'll call it even. You can make me whole by subscribing. When Jamie says he used to be with somebody, Millie cranks up the tension by not asking him for any details. And director Michael Shanks' decision to not have her ask the most obvious and basic of questions was just genius. We can see he's wearing 2 rings, and given he wants Millie to find the cave where the dog's fused, it's just impossible to figure out what might have happened to his husband. Then Tim appears outside the window like a hobbit pervert, so we don't have to think about what happened to Jamie's husband. Woohoo! That same night, Tim deduces the missing couple from the prologue vanished right in their backyard. His doctor told him that verbatim in this earlier scene, but director Michael Shanks' commitment to ensuring we don't miss the important details is just genius. Then Millie opens the door and scares Tim right out of his chair, and he's so scared, instead of helping her, his face stays like this for 6 straight minutes. And from this moment until the end of the movie, approximately 30 minutes from now, now, Tim's voice sounds like this to convey his, seriosity.
Millie, wake up!
Then Tim describes each of the times they've been stuck together for us in full detail, even though we've watched them all ourselves as scenes in this movie. And then he speculates maybe this all has something to do with the cave. Sorry, what I meant to say was, then Tim speculates, maybe this has something to do with the cave. And director Michael Shanks' decision to have Dave Franco talk like this for an entire act was just genius. When Millie tries leaving, she can't because they are stuck together again. And later that night, they start sticking together again, only this time it really turns the conflict up to 10 because it happens in the hall. When they wake up, their arms are stuck together, so Millie has to cut them apart because Tim's as skilled with a saw as he is with his axe. And after they're separated, she screams at Tim for not wanting to go to the hospital like a responsible person. And if you're wondering why she didn't insist they go to the hospital 3 minutes ago to be cut apart by professionals in a sterile environment like a responsible person, Tim goes back to the cave while Millie gets her keys from Jamie's. She watches a video of Jamie and his husband fusing together to become who he is now, which was very unexpected. We also weren't expecting to learn the cave is actually a church where Jamie's cult used to congregate. And if you're having trouble wrapping your head around the logistics of this kind of arrangement, I will remind you, you didn't kick up a stink about the dogs melding together. Cults are magic. He tries coaxing Millie into fusing with Tim, and she doesn't want to, but he cuts her with a special ring to expedite the fusion process anyways. Then Millie brings the second act to a close by smacking Jamie in the face. And director Michael Shanks' decision to not have Tim collect Millie's keys shows he really understands his characters, because he knew the blood would have made Tim faint and shit his BMX shorts. It turns out the missing couple was in the cave the entire time. Let's not dwell on the sniffer dogs missing them earlier in such a tiny space. Dogs have off days too, and we're not about bashing animals here at Jonny Recaps, even if they are stupid. The missing couple looks so hideous it sends Tim's voice into overdrive, and he screams all the way up the rope. That would have taken about 10 times the strength of pulling himself out of the hole in the first place, but we can't expect continuity to last an entire movie, even with a genius director. Back home, they stick together again. So Tim drops to one knee and tells Millie he's been miserable without her. And the fact they've never been apart even for a moment in this film highlights Tim's poetic prowess, possibly. He hasn't changed. He hasn't got a job. He still can't make his fingers do an E minor shape. But man, can he grovel in the gravel like a pro. And like most beautiful, intelligent women would, Millie finds the groveling irresistible. And the instant he's won her back, he says he's going to unalive himself because in this modern, quirky, better-than-your relationship, nothing says love more than doing yourself in the driveway. But ultimately, it doesn't matter because apparently Jamie pushed the ancient, specially crafted ceremonial ring halfway through Millie's body. So she slips peacefully into oblivion as Tim struggles to hold her up for the entire scene with his sleek, pipe cleaner, modern male lead arms. We at Jonny Recaps understand this horror film has been short on horror. To compensate, stick around at the end of the video for a complimentary community note pertaining to this scene. When she wakes up on the couch, they are stuck together again, and Millie is disappointed he saved her life because she wanted to let him go. And when he asks her, "Do you want to let me go?" she says no. And Michael Shanks' decision to have the dialogue spin us round and round in little circles this late in the story as if to mimic the couple's confused state was just genius. And that's when they break out the Spice Girls, and the fact this happens to be just about the only song ever written about two people turning into one does not make this musical choice any less original. We watch the real-life couple naked and making out as they fuse, which presents potentially questionable filmmaking motivations if you think about it, so don't think about it. In the final shot, we see Plato's androgynous ideal fully realized with beautiful, natural CGI. As we're leaving the theater, we're wondering whether whether this accursed fusion is a good thing or a bad thing, or something they were forced to do, or something they wanted to do, or something Tim was terrified not to do after seeing the ugly cave couple. Perhaps it was a last resort to save Millie's life, maybe something in the water made it impossible to resist, or maybe they have feelings for each other. As we start our drive home, we daydream about Tim learning how to play basic chords on his guitar to perhaps justify the thousands of dollars worth of musical equipment he's somehow acquired as a broke non-musician. And we wonder if Jamie hired Millie so she could move into a house with a magical church hole behind it so she could blend into her husband the way he did. And if so, we also naturally ponder whether he arranged the job or the house first. And finally, we wonder if Millie's parents see what we're looking at, or if this is just another metaphor. If Tim's guitar playing does improve, will he inherit Millie's sense of smell? After all, there's just no telling how many dead rats he might come across with them living in a forest now. At the end of this movie, the only thing we know for sure is that we will never know any of these things for sure. And that's beautiful. Because director Michael Shanks ended this movie by reminding us love can be confusing and messy, and sometimes, if they drink dirty ancient water, two dogs can get stuck together. I would highly recommend Together if you haven't seen it already, and if you have, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section. As always, thank you very much for watching my little video. I hope I've kept you entertained as promised, and I'm happy to report I now know what it feels like to review a movie properly like the big successful channels. Until next time, folks. In the real world, bleeding to death is not a tranquil, eye-fluttering transition into peaceful, eternal rest. When you lose a significant quantity of blood, it stands to reason you also lose an equal quantity of hemoglobin. And that means you can't transport oxygen to and from your cells anymore. Movies like to make it look as if your partner's Ambien just kicked in. But in reality, they'll be bucking and writhing and turning dark purple in your arms as they spend their last minutes gasping and gawking up at you until they eventually lose consciousness. And during those precious final moments, no volume of air traveling into their already shriveling lungs will relieve the inescapable suffocating sensation slowly robbing them of their eyesight. So, you can rest assured you're wasting your time attempting to comfort them, saying nice things into their bulging, bloodshot, frantic eyes. Going forward, when viewing similar death scenes, instead of this Hollywood facade, perhaps try picturing a largemouth bass flopping around on the floor of a fishing boat. Except you've loved the bass since high school, and after what you've just been forced to witness, you'll never be able to share yourself romantically or otherwise with anybody ever again. And that's if you're lucky enough not to have them use their final words to blame you for whatever happened. At Jonny Recaps, we hope this dose of reality makes up for the distinct lack of horror in today's supernatural body horror movie.